President Obama says he's ready to finish the job America started in Afghanistan, but his critics say it's a triumph of politics over strategy. This is Special Report. Good evening, I'm Brett Baer. President Obama wants to keep fewer than 10,000 American troops in Afghanistan as advisors after the end of this year. The announcement today is part of what the president describes as his effort to bring a responsible end to a war that began after the 9/11 attacks. Others are calling it anything but responsible. Senior White House Foreign Affairs correspondent Wendell Goller starts us off tonight.
In a Rose Garden announcement, the president said half the residual force in Afghanistan will come home in 2015 and the rest by the time he leaves office.
We have now been in Afghanistan longer than many Americans expected.
Administration officials want to prevent the weakened central authority they're seeing in Iraq, where a deal to leave a residual force fell through when that country's leaders refused to grant the members immunity from prosecution. The Afghan force will act as trainers and go after terrorists, but not everyone's convinced it can do the job.
I personally think that the minimum really responsible level was about 30,000. At 2025 U.S., you could make up the difference with NATO.
Sunday, in an unannounced visit to Afghanistan, President Obama told the commanders on the ground he wanted to meet with them face-to-face before making the decision, and later told servicemen and women he hoped a residual force would preserve the gains they'd made.
We're going to make sure that Afghanistan can never again, ever, be used again to launch an attack against our country.
Mr. Obama informed outgoing Afghan President Hamid Karzai, who had backed away from an agreement on the post-2014 force. Both candidates in a June 14th runoff election have said they'll sign the deal, and President Obama's counting on them to do that. Republican Senators Kelly Ayotte, John McCain, and Lindsey Graham condemned the timetable, calling it, quote, a monumental mistake and a triumph of politics over strategy. Administration officials say timetables have helped Afghanistan's military meet its goals and our NATO partners deliver on their commitments, but critics suspect by making the timetable public, the president is really talking to his political supporters. And yet this, Mr. Obama said, is how wars end in the 21st century.
Afghanistan will not be a perfect place, and it is not America's responsibility to make it one. The future of Afghanistan must be decided by Afghans.
The president will outline America's post-war foreign policy in a commencement address at West Point on Wednesday. His aides say he wants to use all the tools in America's arsenal without overreaching, but his critics say he's reluctant to use some of the power he has. Brett?
Wendell Goller live on the North Lawn. Wendell, thank you. You can add Senator John McCain to the list of lawmakers calling for the Justice Department to investigate the VA scandal.
We have an obligation to the veterans who are living, and that obligation is not being fulfilled today by our Veterans Administration.
The head of the House Veterans Affairs Committee says the VA has yet to confirm the appearance tomorrow night of officials who ducked a hearing last week. Chairman Jeff Miller says he'll subpoena the officials if they don't show up for that evening hearing. President Obama is preparing to unveil a cornerstone of his plan to fight what he has repeatedly declared as the fact of climate change and the damage it will cause. Monday, we will learn details of a proposed rule aimed at reducing carbon emissions by coal-fired power plants. Republicans and business groups already characterize the president's efforts as a war on coal and say the plan will likely cost too much money and too many jobs. If you've seen many spy movies or spy TV shows, you know the CIA euphemism station chief is actually the agency's top man in any given location. That name is supposed to be secret to all but a few people. This weekend, the Obama White House was responsible for identifying the Afghanistan station chief to thousands of journalists. Correspondent Doug McElway tonight with the anatomy of a major blunder.
They tried to, quote, unring the bell, is how Washington Post and White House pool reporter Scott Wilson described the administration's attempt to undo the damage from its leaking the name of the CIA station chief in Afghanistan.
Well, it is just jaw-dropping incompetence. When I first read this story, I was speechless.
The name was included on a list of 15 senior administration officials who met with the president during Sunday's trip to Afghanistan. The list was compiled by the military, who submitted it to the White House press office. who emailed it to the Pool reporter, who sent it back to the White House to be checked for factual accuracy. Yet the leak went unnoticed by press office staff before it was blasted out to 6,000 reporters who receive White House Pool reports.
I don't know how an undercover name accidentally gets put on a list twice and then gets leaked. But I'm fairly confident the U.S. Embassy official who did that will not be prosecuted.
Jesselyn Radak is a lawyer who represented another CIA leaker, John Kiriakou, the agent who first revealed the CIA's waterboarding of terrorist detainees, now serving time for intentionally leaking the name of another CIA officer to a reporter. Radak finds the administration's leak policy to be hypocritical.
For example, by former CIA chief Leon Panetta disclosing the undercover names of SEALs for the production of the Hollywood film Zero Dark 30.
Under the Intelligence Identities Protection Act, the leak of a CIA operative's name can be prosecuted if it's intentional, but intention can be a gray area. Critics point to the outing of former spy Valerie Plame in 2003 as a case in point.
And then resulted in some very unfair treatment of a lot of other people in the Bush administration, like Scooter Libby. But that was just a malicious piece of gossip. This is utter incompetence. There is no justification for this. There's no explanation for it. It's like there's nobody in charge at the White House.
Late today, the White House said that the chief of staff here has asked White House counsel Neil Eggleston to look into what happened and report back with recommendations to make sure that something like this never happens again. Brett?
Doug McKelway in the White House briefing room. Doug, thank you. Senior political analyst Britt Hume is here tonight with analysis, his thoughts on what this episode may tell us about the Obama White House. Good evening, Britt.
Hello, Brett. You know, this, I think, in political terms, is damaging to the administration because it feeds into the question of whether the administration can, in fact, administer. You know, we had first the fiasco with the rollout of the health care program. Now we've got the troubles at the VA. Now this blunder by the White House press office itself. And think about this. This is an administration that is fond of telling us that, or a president is fond of telling us that he finds out about these things from, in the press. In this case, this was something that his press office put out, and the mistake wasn't noted until somebody in the press told them about it. So they found out about this from the press, all right, after they'd put it out. I mean, that's a high level of bungling, I think it's fair to say. And I think it just sort of feeds into this whole question about whether the administration can really run anything. Look, it's certainly fair to say that given the size of the government, that every administration is going to have some trouble in some agency somewhere. I mean, think of George W. Bush and his problems with FEMA and Hurricane Katrina. That was, you know, it was kind of an epic at the time. In this administration, I think, you know, it's getting to a certain critical mass where you wonder whether people aren't going to say these people, you know, don't know what they're doing, and they're not going to, and they're not finding out.
Put aside the security concerns for this person and his job. What about here at home, the politics of how this plays and the size of the blunder?
Well, first of all, the comparisons, I think, to the Valerie Plame case, which we all remember, in which Karl Rove was remorselessly pursued by the special prosecutor. Scooter Libby, who wasn't the person who leaked the name, was successfully prosecuted for what he said in the grand jury and so on. This was a woman, even though her status was supposed to be classified, she was working at a desk in Virginia. This is a guy on the front lines in Afghanistan. It's a very different matter, and I think it's fair to say much more serious, and I think the public will recognize that. And as I say, I think it feeds into this question about whether, you know, these are people who can run anything.
Finally, going back to the Afghanistan drawdown announcement, your thoughts on that and how it plays?
Well, look, if you're going to take the troops out of Afghanistan, why do you need to announce that? Why would you need to let the enemy know that you're going to be leaving or how much of your force you're going to draw down? There's no need to do that unless the need is political in some way. I mean, other than that, strategically it makes no sense. Tactically it makes no sense. It makes the only level in which I can see that it makes any sense is, as critics I think have fairly said, politics.
All right, Britt, thank you.
Bet.
Up next, an ultimatum from Ukraine's government to pro-Russia separatists. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates across the country are covering tonight. KKFX in Santa Barbara, California, with a day of mourning for the victims of Friday's murderous rampage by 22-year-old Elliot Rodger. A special memorial service begins at the top of the hour. A makeshift tribute has been set up by the people of Santa Barbara. Fox 25 in Boston with a 19-year-old MIT student who wants to become the youngest person to circumnavigate the world on a solo flight. Matt Guthmiller begins his voyage Wednesday. And this is a live look at the Bay Bridge from KTVU in San Francisco, our affiliate there. The big story there tonight is a wealthy man who sets up social media scavenger hunts. The man calls it an anonymous social experiment for good. He uses Twitter to leave clues for people to find cash prizes, about $1,000 each time. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.